Hey everybody, welcome back. This is the next episode of Authors Bantering. I'm Josh Bresslin, that's Ian M. Rogers. This week, we're going to discuss when should someone take time away? When should you put a pause on your writing journey? Um,
I,
I'm
I, I like I like a way of it sounds so much grander than I think I was picturing. I mean the writing journey, and the idea of pause could be a week, it could be a month, it could be 6 months. It could be it
yeah,
could be any length of time. So it's the idea like what circumstances fall into place that would require or make it a good idea for somebody to take a pause, take a break, and how do we handle that mentally?
bingo. So I'm the write every day guy, right? I'm the so you probably would figure that I'd be like never take time, never put a pause on projects, but I'm not going to say that. As weird as it goes against kind of my philosophy, I recognize that for most people this can be really important. And even if you're writing every day, I actually think this could be really important. So here is kind of my advice, I suppose, right? I generally would not advocate for taking time away from writing unless you are between projects. I don't
Mm,
actually oppose it. I think if you're on a project, you should be writing every single day. I think probably in general, like writing every day is an important thing. But if you had to take time away, right, I can see a lot of benefit to it. So my recommendation would be to do it between projects when you are finished with one and you have time in between. That's when it might be a good idea to take time away. The reason why is it's a very yin yang idea, right? You spend a lot of time doing this sort of yang energy, right? The writing, the creating process. But you need to do the yin. You need to replenish the well. You have to sort of get back to why you're interested in this art form, right? Why you're interested in the subject that you're writing about, or you're thinking, about writing. What inspires you. As much as I talk about, not waiting for inspiration, right? Inspiration does play a factor, and taking time away can be really, really, really important if that's what you're seeking. And so, if you're looking to do that, I think taking time away can be very beneficial, but only when you are done with a project. I think if you stop in the middle of one, that's a recipe for a lot of issues, a lot of confusion. I think you have a project that's half finished, you're going to end up tabling anyways, maybe. So that would be my advice: is waiting
I'm,
until you are done with one project to maybe considering taking time away.
So I'm really glad you made that distinction actually, because I
Mm-hmm.
had not been thinking of that distinction when we came up with this topic.
Okay.
And for me, well, no, for me, I think that again, the difference between finishing and writing at the end, or even finishing like a second or third draft on something, and then saying, okay, now I'm going to take a break for whatever period of time. That is very different than ending in mid sentence or mid chapter, or worse yet, when you're not sure what's going to happen next. And so there's a difficult problem facing you. And then you take time away, and then the difficult problem gets bigger and bigger, and you never quite solve it. And it becomes this mountain that needs to be overcome. I
Yes.
think in the first scenario, where you have a natural stopping point when the project or the draft is over, I think it's much easier to start anew and get that new beginning either with the next project or with the next draft of the current project. So I think that's very, very easy to do that. I think as someone who has taken a large time away from his own writing, it is not impossible to get back into a bigger project when you end mid chapter. Um, but it is a lot harder, especially if you don't have the discipline, or the project has other types of problems. For example, if it's not fully
Yeah.
developed yet in some way, and you're going to be facing a bigger hurdle by stepping away from it mentally, I think that can be really, really hard. And again, if you're a new writer who doesn't have those skills, or you're facing a bigger project for the first time, it can be really, really intimidating to get back in. It really, really can. I do think that taking breaks gets easier with practice. Sort of as you finished one, two, three, however many bigger projects, and just becomes this bigger process. I'll talk a little bit about a longer break that I took last year. So I had just come back from living in Japan, actually. So I was living abroad, and I was writing there and working. And as I was there, because my job was getting busier and busier and busier, my stress level was getting more and more and more. And so 2 months before I realized, okay, I need to go on break. This is just too much. There's
Yep.
too much to be done. I was looking at the transition, and it was becoming more and more stressful to even do a small amount of writing per week. I mean, we're talking 2 hours was just becoming too much. And so I said, okay, I'm going to use that 2 hours in a different way. I'm going to deal with these other problems, then I'm going to pick it up at a later date. I was about halfway through this project. I was mid-chapter at the time. It was not a particularly difficult chapter. I knew what was going to happen next, but again, it was just a time and stress thing. So I hit the pause button. I finished up what I needed to do in Japan. I got back to the States. You know, you get back, you're jet lagged, and there's a million things to be set up, and all of that comes with, you know, moving to another country. I was also launching my first book, which was coming out at the same time, so I was busy with that, and there was a lot to be done there. And meanwhile, this project, my second novel that I was working on, was still, the pause button was still on. It was still there, sort of sitting in limbo. And what I did was, for a period of about 4 months after I got back, so the break was about 6 months total, I transitioned back to living in America. I dealt with the launch of my first book. I worked to launch my editing business, and, you know, really expanded that. I built a website. I did all these other projects that needed to be done that I had been kind of kicking the can along the road for. And that was really good because it cleaned my slate in a way. It made it so that those things weren't weighing on my mind anymore. They were gone. They were finished. They'd been checked off the to-do list. And once I had reached that point, I realized, okay, I'm basically here now. I can get back into it. I want to get back into this project. I know I can finish it. I know what the rest of this chapter goes. And I made a plan to start, and then I got back in. And so, and again, that was a skill that I developed between, you know, knowing my own writing craft and being good at scheduling and knowing what my long-term goals are. So it was very important to me to finish this book. And so it was a priority to do that. And so stopping and starting again was a deliberate choice. I didn't do it. I didn't stop because the writing got hard, but I stopped because, okay, circumstances were such so that it's not a good idea for me to write at that moment. And then when circumstances were better for me to write at that moment, I made a deliberate choice to start again. And I do not regret that at all. I think, especially with the draft I was working on, the second draft came out much cleaner than the some of the pages I'd been writing prior to the break, which were much sloppier or not focused the way they needed to be. So it really helped the writing process a lot. And it increased my own confidence in being able to take breaks and come back to it. Like, I had done it before, and now I know I can do it again. And so for me, it was really a tremendous skill building exercise. So now, you know, since then, if something comes up in my personal life, in my work life, or I'm, you know, sick or something else happens, I feel okay taking a 1 day, a 1 week, a 2 week, a 1 month break, you know, to deal with these other things. Because I know that I can get back into it again. And again, I don't like to do that, and I don't do that lightly.
Yep.
But if circumstances do reach a point where it's like, okay, back up, I have to deal with this other thing. This other thing is very important. It's very pressing. If I don't deal with it now, then trouble is going to happen. I feel comfortable hitting pause on writing and then hitting play again at a future time when that is when that's been settled. Is this making sense? Is this kind of
it is so
the context model?
it is so it's an important distinction that you're making, which is you're not taking time away because you're frustrated with the project, which I guess is the big thing I think we want to get across here. You're focusing on life and things outside of basically got in the way. I didn't have time, and I simply had to put it aside. It was not, I got stuck, I couldn't figure out this chapter, I couldn't figure out how to write this ending, I couldn't figure out whatever thing. And I stopped. It was something else came up. And it's important because too many people, I think they take breaks at the wrong time, which I think is what we want to caution against. Yes. You don't want to take a break when the writing gets difficult, right? You have to push through. Even it's Stephen King has an awesome quote about that, which is like, you know, stopping whenever the writing gets hard is almost never a good idea. You have to keep going, even if it feels like you're just shoveling shit, right? And it's so true. Like, you just push through it, and eventually, somehow, it's very weird. usually a solution will come to you. But taking time away almost never really solves that problem.
I would argue that it makes the problem worse in that,
Yeah.
because if something's
Yes.
difficult on the page and your way of dealing with that is to step away, then it becomes like this demon. It becomes this thing that's really intimidating to get back into. You
Right.
know, it becomes this hurdle that has to be overcome. When I took the 6 month break that I talked about, there wasn't a hurdle. There just wasn't. I knew exactly how the rest of that scene that I was writing was going to go. And had it been a difficult scene, like coincidentally, had I been having problem or stress in my regular life, and then problem on the page as well, if those two things had lined up, I guarantee you it would have been 100 times more difficult for me to start writing again.
Yes.
But and so that's, I think that I'm really glad that you made this distinction, because that's the wrong reason to step
Yep.
away. Like if you have a problem on the page, don't run away from it. Stay it, shovel the shit, like deal with it, think about it, outline it, put in a temporary version of it and come back to it later,
Bingo.
but something to get you over that hurdle.
Yep.
That isn't taking weeks off.
Yep. I can think of very few times. Actually, one of the few times actually was very recently with a short story I worked on, where I put it aside thinking I wasn't going to work on it. I couldn't figure out, and now I've actually gone back to it like 4 months later, and I actually found a solution to it. It's very rare. That almost never happens. This is actually, I'm just, now that off the top of my head.
No, I'm glad you brought that up, actually, and I'm wondering, like, speculation, of course, but like, do you think that for you as a writer who was just starting out, like years before, do you think you would have been able to do that like 5 years ago?
No, no. So if I took any time away at all, the story never got better. The ones that have actually finished and that ever got done, right? Even as bad as they were, the ones I actually wrote, the ones that maybe you've seen before, right? Those are ones that I wrote right through. I never put a pause on. I never put that aside and worked on a different project, etc. It was always the ones that I stuck with, just that one project, and I just pushed through it. That's the only way you can do it. Like I don't think there's any. I don't think working on multiple projects. I don't think putting something aside, whatever is going to work. I think you have to just push through it and then take time off between your projects or between things. And to be frank, the reason why I'm advocating actually for breaks, right? Where I'm not like poo-pooing that as something go against the right everyday mentality, is there's a very challenging idea, and there's a very strong pitfall that you will experience if you write every day, which is if you never take time off, right? You don't have time to thrash on your projects before you work on them. And what I mean by that is,
I agree with that.
a lot of people,
flesh it out.
Yeah. So thrashing basically is the idea basically of going through all the issues that could come up and dealing with them, right? When it comes to writing, thrashing is dealing with, oh my god, I don't know what I'm going to write. How am I going to get this finished? It's the ideas about, I don't know what these characters are doing. I don't know who these characters are. I don't really, people are going to read this and they're not going to like it. The writing's poor. And going beyond that, it's, this book's already been written before. It's too much like this other book. It's not a topic that's selling. It's not a genre that's selling right now. It's all the negative, like lower, like lizard brain things that come to you, especially when you are in the middle of a project. Yes. For a lot of us, especially people that write every day, when you just go from one project to the next, right? You don't have a chance to thrash before you do it. And so what that does is you get into your project, you've kind of halfway considered it, right? In your head, you're like, oh, it's a good idea. You get into it and you start to realize, oh, this was a mistake. This project does not have a lot of life to it. It doesn't have as much sustainability. The topic isn't as deep as I thought. The characters, the story is not as sustainable. It doesn't have as much quality as I thought it was. I don't think working on this for 2 years is going to produce a really strong book for an agent or publisher or whatever. And what happens is when you take these writer breaks, you get a chance to thrash at the beginning when the cost is very low, right? The cost of thrashing before you at the beginning of the book is nothing, right? Because you just go, oh, it's an okay idea, I like it, and then a day later you think about it, you're like, well, it's way too much like the other book, and honestly, I don't really care for the character, and an agent's not going to really find that appealing. It's a hard sell. All right, I'm going to put it aside. I'm going to work on something else, right? As opposed to writing the first draft and getting halfway through the second draft, and all of a sudden the ideas start coming to you, and you've already invested 6 months, 9 months, 12 months into a project that you're starting to realize does not have life to it at all. That is a really important thing that can come up when you take these breaks, and that's a huge thing to do between these projects. Is if you have another one, think about it, thrash at the beginning, go through
Yeah.
all the negatives, all of the reasons why you
Yeah.
shouldn't do it. Really take your time and consider it. And then once you're certain
Yeah.
and once you've gone through all of it, then write forward and don't let your inner critic ever have a chance to get in. Your inner critic can have full reign between projects, but never once you start working on one. So really deal with the inner critic before you even begin.
I like how this is bringing us around full circle to
Yeah.
kind of the original point you made about taking breaks in between projects
Yeah.
being the good place to do that. And again, I think that sort of planning, outlining, brainstorming, fleshing out a project mentally before a pencil even goes on a page, even for an outline or a note taking kind of way, I think is so tremendously important. For me, that allows me to separate good ideas that are worth developing and worth putting on the page from ideas that don't hold water. And I never understood people who have an idea on Monday morning and then start writing on Monday afternoon, or like the minute that they get the idea, and they sort of thrive on that steam of the excitement of the moment of having that
Yeah.
idea. I can't write that way. For me, I have to really, really sort of flesh out more of what a project looks like. At least more than when you have an idea, it's just an idea, just a notion, right? But then the more you reflect on it, it gets bigger and it starts to get some form to it, and you figure, oh, okay, well this character could do this, and then maybe there's another character here, and then the plot goes like all that little stuff, and fleshing that out just mentally.
Mm-hmm.
For me, if I'm able to do that, I know, okay, this idea is worth something. And if I can't, it's just gone. And I know that it's not an idea. And so,
Yeah.
again, I think it's easier to do that if you're not currently working on another project and investing all of your time and energy into doing that. I think it's not impossible to do that kind of mental work that I was just describing while you're
Yeah.
working on another project. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's possible to, those seem to use two different parts of the brain to me. But again, I think a break is potentially a much better time to be doing that.
Absolutely. But yeah, and so surprisingly, I'm very pro break. Right? I don't know if anyone going into this might have thought that, but yes, I am all for people taking time away from the keyboard and actually taking segmented plan time away, whether it's days, weeks, months, perhaps, and there's nothing wrong with that. Years, I'd be like, eh. But
Years is put. If you're taking a year off, that is almost certainly a sign of a bigger problem, either in your mental state or your mental block against writing, or there's some bigger problem in your life that really has to be addressed.
or you hit
If
it
you have a
big.
job that, sorry,
I said, or you hit it big. You know what I mean?
oh,
Like,
okay,
if
maybe there's
I'll
that
be honest,
success,
if I
really
get some major
people,
book deal, like I was to get like some major one, maybe get film rights sold, whatever, basically, and I had a ton of cash, I might just take a year off and not like it. Here's the thing: I could take a year off. I'd still like sporadically still write, and make, but like I could conceivably take a year off, not write, just come up, try to really think of an idea, really thrash it out, right, and then come back a year later with like a really strong outline and hammer this thing right out. I probably could. Maybe I would. Maybe, I don't know. It'd be weird. Now,
That's a pretty big
maybe.
hypothetical. I like to think that if I did
Yeah.
get, some big book contract like that, or some,
Yeah.
very, very substantial break that was bigger than, breaks I've previously gotten, I like to think that I would, be happy, celebrate, deal with what I needed to deal with to make that break, or to make that deal happen. But then I'd be planning the next project. I'd be back to it the next week or the next month. I'd schedule a time to start the next thing, and just like it was any other kind of smaller break, or smaller deal, I should say. So again, I haven't gotten to that point yet, so maybe that would change. Maybe there would be more pressure that would affect me in some way. It's really hard to say, but I know what I would like to be doing, and that's treating the big deal, the big contract, as just another opportunity, and then on Monday it's back to writing again.
Yeah. But yeah, so some ideas to play around with there. We both basically, as we said, pretty supportive of this idea. Again, if it's done the right way for the right reasons, this could actually be very beneficial if you're a writer. If you use it as kind of an effective tool at the right time. And so with that, we're going to sign off here. I'm Josh Bresslin, Ian M. Rogers, and we will see you next week.
Take it easy.